David, I'm sure that you've heard some of these comments before, but when you say that you're a pacifist, you're inevitably going to hear somebody say, well, you know, what happens if somebody, you know, invades your home and maybe attacks your children or attacks a loved one? How does pacifism play out in a practical sense?
The main ideas in pacifism come from the idea that, and these are the words of Martin Luther King now, because he's a much greater man than I, hate begets hate, violence begets violence. I'll use a historical example now. Germany, after World War I, was left decimated, poor. Their economy was in a state such that marks were more valuable to be burned for warmth than they were for actual currency. Because of World War I, Germany rallied very aggressively behind a militant leader who we all know as Adolf Hitler, and we saw the horror that was World War II. In history, violent acts almost always translate into future acts of violence. Of course, World War I and World War II are two very great examples of that, and probably abnormally large, but that doesn't discount it from consideration when we talk about pacifism. If you're asking for a roadmap, okay, how would I suggest we implement this today? I don't know, I'm not in office. What I would suggest is that we as the United States have the opportunity to do so much more with the world. We talk about just wars. We talk about the need to remove tyrannical dictators. I don't deny that the events in World War II were awful and needed some attention. I don't deny that Saddam Hussein was an awful dictator. But as a historian, I have to ask the question, what happened? How did these happen? What happened before that to get to that point? And I think when we start asking those questions of how and why, we will become more aware of how our actions and the actions of other countries lead to these violent answers. So where do we go from here? I don't know. I think first we have to put down the guns and start talking. In the future, though, I think that we stop turning to our weapons, to our military, before we seek diplomatic solutions.
You brought up both Iraq and Iran. I'd like you to address what you think. You have the convenience of hindsight in looking at the Iraq War, but you don't have that convenience with the Iranian situation. Maybe just lay out a little bit of how you think we could have done better work in Iraq and avoided the conflict, and then how we might be able to avoid conflict with Iran.
Sure. I think the biggest problem with Iraq was the apparent notion that it's the United States' role as a superpower to go in and then take charge of another country, to, in a sense, kick down their door and say, you guys are having problems, you're not doing things right, you have these weapons that we suspect you have. It is our job as the United States to come in and disarm you, to reorganize you, and to turn you into a functional government. I don't think it's the role of the United States, and our president agreed with me when he was elected, that we are not nation builders. It is not our job as a superpower country to take countries that are struggling and knock them down, break them up, and then reform them. I think that we're spending, I looked at nationalpriorities.org. It's a group of economic analysts who analyze primarily where our tax dollars are going. And 27% of our taxes now are going to military spending, which translates into nearly $500 billion over the length of this war. I think that those dollars could be better spent in foreign policy, in diplomacy, in the UN. I think that the UN is an organization that was created after World War II so that we could have these diplomatic channels to other countries. If we see a problem in another country, the UN is really the body who should be going in and saying, hey, we see you have this problem. If there is violence to be had, I think the UN should be the one to enact it, not the United States, and hopefully not the UN either. I think that the diplomatic channels there are definitely in place to reach peaceful solutions and not solutions that leave us with dead sons and daughters.